Welcome to the GOTO podcast. Each episode covers the brightest and boldest ideas from the world's leading experts in software development. Tune in for practical lessons, compelling theories, and plenty of inspiration. GOTO gathers the brightest minds in the software community to help developers tackle projects today, plan for tomorrow, and create a better future. Stay up to date with the latest in tech through GOTO's top-rated events held online and in person in cities like Amsterdam, London, Copenhagen, and Chicago, and by subscribing to the GOTO Conference's YouTube channel, where you can find thousands more high-quality dev talks. Learn more at gotopia.tech.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GOTO Book Club. I am Ricky Robinett. I lead up developer relations at Cloudflare, and I'm super stoked to get to chat to Ashley Peacock today, who wrote Serverless Apps on Cloudflare. Ashley, you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley. As Ricky said, I'm the author of Serverless Apps on Cloudflare, book all about Cloudflare, and I am a staff engineer here in London. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. You said a book all about Cloudflare. One of the things you and I have talked about is sometimes when we say to a developer, like, have you heard of Cloudflare? They say yes, but they maybe haven't heard about what you're talking about in the book. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think so. Cloudflare is effectively like a competitor, if you like, to the likes of AWS, Azure, GCP, and all those. But when people hear about Cloudflare, they think like a security company. They just do like firewalls and that kind of like security side, which obviously they absolutely do. But the side I'm more interested in, and the side we're going to talk about today, is the developer portal side of the platform, where you can deploy your apps. There's databases, caches, basically everything you need to build your applications. And from my point of view, I wrote the book because I felt like it was kind of underutilized, if you like. Not many people knew about it. I think it's gaining a bit more traction now. But yeah, that was my kind of driving force behind writing the book.
Awesome. Yeah. And I love telling the story a little bit of how the platform happened. If it's not too much of a divergence, which is to build the Cloudflare network, often people think of us as a CDN or security company. We had to put data centers all over the world. And as we did that, something interesting happened, which is customers said, hey, you have these data centers everywhere close to our users. Can we run our code on those servers? And it was a thing that actually we didn't set out to do, but customers kept asking for it. And originally to like customize their CDN and do different custom rules, we put this workers layer that let them customize things with JavaScript. And then it just kept growing from there. So I always love that side of the story just because it's such a customer driven part of our platform.
Yeah. I remember, I think the first time I did anything on Cloudflare was that initial kind of, I can't remember what they were called. Because I don't know if they were called workers initially, but it was effectively like editing JavaScript in the browser to modify like HTTP headers was like the very first thing. And obviously at that point I was like, oh, this is terrifying. I'm writing JavaScript like in my browser and I have no idea if it's going to work. It's come a long way now. And I think the first app I built was like a Discord bot. And I remember even then, this was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I think there was only like workers and maybe KV was the only storage. So even then, it was still a little too green to build like full apps on. But nowadays, I feel like it has everything you need.
I love hearing everyone's first apps. And I do think the best kind of coding is a little terrifying, where you're doing it and you're like, what is going to happen here? And so I like that you had that feeling a little bit in the early days. So the book, talk about what is in there, the things you show people, what they'd learn if they went through it.
Yeah. So I think it tries to cover all the key parts of the developer platform. So it kind of takes a series of mini projects and breaks them down into kind of sizable chunks, where each chapter effectively focuses on a different product. So we've talked about workers here, for example, and you can think of workers, the nearest parallel I can draw is AWS Lambda. It's very different in terms of like runtime and how you build on it, which the book will cover. But that's the nearest parallel I can draw that, most people have heard of Lambda. So it's the easiest one to draw. Moving on from workers, you learned how you can use databases. So D1 is Cloudflare's SQLite database. There is KV in there for caching. There is R2, which is effectively like AWS S3. It's compatible with S3, so it does the same job. There are queues, so you can build asynchronous applications on Cloudflare using queues. It, of course, includes some AI, because it wouldn't be a book in this day and age without some AI. So Cloudflare has their own inference platform called Workers AI, where you can run a bunch of models. So it uses that too. And yeah, using the suite of products, you build a bunch of projects that will teach you how to use each product. And I think each of them has some unique things to Cloudflare that's important to learn, especially like I talked about. Workers is similar to Lambda, but it's not the same. And it's important to kind of highlight that part of the platform. And yeah, you'll just gradually level up on the platform throughout, and ending with how you deploy them as well. Because I think that's important. In the book, it uses GitHub Actions, for example. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
What is your favorite thing you've built on the platform?
I think one of the things I built lately, and I demoed it at a developer worker night a few weeks ago, is an email-based AI support agent that can also do live chat and also do human in the loop. So I think it effectively uses this cool piece of functionality for workers, where you can effectively bind email addresses to workers, so that when an email is received to a specific email address or a catch-all, you can have a worker that's effectively invoked. Some code is executed, and then you could do whatever you like with it. And in this case, you could send an email to this AI support agent and then get a response back via email. Nice and easy. But then similarly, you could flip over to a live chat and then live talk to the AI as well. And then there's also a mechanism where a human could join that live chat. And I think the thing that brought this all together that I actually haven't mentioned yet, and I can't believe I didn't mention it earlier, of course, is the kind of Cloudflare's party piece, as I often call it, of durable objects, which every time I explain what a durable object is, it changes. I feel like I describe it slightly different every time, but I think I've settled roughly on that it's like mini little servers that you can deploy pretty much anywhere in the world. And it's durable in that it has state built into it. And whenever that particular instance, so in this case, going back to the email agent, you have, a support case is one durable object. So it kind of maps one-to-one to your kind of key entities. And then it has a bunch of kind of cool pieces of technology built on top of it. And in this case, it uses WebSockets. So it has WebSockets built into it, which really enables kind of those real-time applications like a live chat, for example.
I love hearing you explain things. And also, if folks listening don't follow you on social media, you do these great posts where you do a detailed breakdown of different concepts. So not just the book, you can get it online, live. And thinking of agents, can we zoom out just for 1 second? And can you give how you think about agents in general and explain them?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
What happens when two leaders who've built global fintech companies sit down to talk about the biggest challenge in payments? In this episode of Crossing Borders, Nima CTO and founder Yuval Giveon speaks with Eagle Rotem, former CEO of Shift4 Europe, about why reliability in payouts is still missing and what it will take to finally fix it. Listen to the full conversation and step into the world of two fintech entrepreneurs.
Ooh, it's going to be a fun one because I feel like everyone has their own definition of what an agent is. I guess the kind of leading one that I think Anthropic has is it's kind of an autonomous thing that can do its kind of a job on its own, is kind of like the high level explanation of what I would say an agent is, with simpler things just being just prompt engineering, right? But an agent has a kind of more, I don't know, a bit of life cycle to it, a bit of autonomy to it. It can do things on its own. You can give it a task and it can go off and do it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I had someone describe it recently as an agent can both read and write from the internet, which was a very easy way for me to grok it, of like it can go out and consume the internet, but it also can take action and leave an impression on the internet. It was an interesting way to describe it.
Yeah, I think that one makes sense to me. And I think like Cloudflare has its own agents package, right? So I think that's one of the newer things that it's not in the book because I think Cloudflare produces a lot of stuff in a rapid rate, but it's effectively like a framework to wrap a bunch of kind of common things that you need to do with agents. So like I just said, it uses durable objects under the hood, I believe. So it gets you like WebSocket connections, so you can talk to your agent via WebSockets. You can send them HTTP requests. You can schedule tasks for your AI agent, and it just wraps it in kind of a nice package that makes it easy for people to use.
Yeah, next edition of the book, it'll make it in.
Yeah.
I don't want this to be too rose-tinted view on things. What are some of the things that you think surprise people when they're using the platform that you cover in the book that people have to think about?
I think the main thing is if you're used to, let's just say AWS, because it's the easiest one, it's the biggest one, and you're deploying, let's just say you're deploying a Lambda to a specific region, right? Because by default, Lambdas are deployed to a given region. With Cloudflare, when you're deploying a worker, it's deployed globally. There is no region. Even if you want to, you cannot deploy it to a single region. It's going to go everywhere, which has benefits. So if I'm in London, you're over, I think, in New York.
Yeah, in New York.
Yeah. So if I deploy something to Cloudflare and we both access that website, you're going to get served from the data center that's on the East Coast, and I'm going to get served from a data center that's here in London. And that's obviously going to reduce the amount of time, the amount of latency that I'm going to get to the application. It's going to be snappier and just quicker, which is nice. But when you throw in other resources, let's say you've got a Postgres database that's hosted in AWS, like a legacy database.
Yep.
And you don't configure things properly in your worker, you're going to suddenly be feeling like, oh, my app is really slow, because for you in New York, your request is going from New York to, let's say, Europe every single time. And that's going to increase. If you're doing like 10 database queries, for example, it's got to go back and forth every single time. And that's where things like smart placement comes in, where you can effectively enable smart placement, and then Cloudflare will automatically place your worker in the place is going to reduce the latency the most. So in this example, if the database is in Europe, it makes sense that the worker is in Europe, because then the round trip time from the worker to the database is minimal. You do increase the latency, obviously, from the end user to the initial worker, but overall it's going to decrease your latency. So that's like one thing where you have to think in global terms. I think is one of the more tricky things.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to talk a little bit about DX, but I'm going to keep it on this thread of things that surprise people to start. One of the things you have to walk people through in the book is bindings. Can you talk a little bit about bindings? And I have found it always takes people just a minute to wrap their head around it. And then once they get it, they love them, but it's a new concept for a lot of folks.
Yeah. So again, if you're used to other platforms, let's say you spin up a database and you want to connect to a database, you probably reach for some sort of SDK, some sort of NPM package or whatever it might be. And you probably go and you get some username or a password or a connection string, whatever it might be. And you put those in your secrets, and then you spin up the SDK and off you go, right? That works fine. With bindings, what you actually do is you create the resource in the same way you would in the other example. You create a database, create a cache, whatever it might be. And then you just get given an ID from Cloudflare normally for that resource. You put it in a configuration file in your worker, which is called a wrangler.toml, or recently you can use JSON for that Wrangler file. And it basically configures or binds your worker to that resource, let's say a database. And then what happens at runtime, and there's no need to use any secrets, you don't have usernames, passwords, just the ID. What happens at runtime is Cloudflare will inject the correct binding. So if it's staging or production or whatever, it'll inject a different binding at runtime into the environment. And then you can, as of I think literally yesterday, you can access that environment throughout your code base. So before yesterday, just to explain, it was injected into kind of the top level kind of point, the entry point to your worker. But if you want to pass around those bindings elsewhere, you had to kind of pass them around. Now you can get them everywhere. But effectively, it's like, and the way I always talk about it is automated kind of platform level dependency injection, right? You don't have to worry about it yourself. You just know that when the worker runs, you're going to get an object injected. And what I should add is it has methods on, like it's a proper client object with methods you can call. So for a cache, it has, put and set and so forth. And it's just really eloquent because you don't have to worry about secrets. There's no configuring IAM roles because Cloudflare handles all that for you. Only you can talk to your resources, and it just feels kind of effortless, really.
Yeah, I did a demo last week and I showed the AI binding, and people really like faces of shock when they realized, wait, I don't have to get API keys. I don't have to do that whole song and dance. And so I hope more platforms embrace this model selfishly, just because as a developer, it makes my life so easy.
Yeah. And I think if you extend it, I think we're talking about bindings here. And one of the other common things you need to do is you often need to call between services, right? So service A calls service B to do something. And that's really common in, let's say, a microservices architecture, for example. And with service bindings with Cloudflare, you can effectively bind two workers together and you get the same sort of thing where it's injected at runtime, same as a binding. But rather than you having to fetch via HTTP, for example, going over the internet and so forth, the actual networking is kind of internal to Cloudflare. You don't worry about it. And I think quite commonly they'll even run on the same data center, same machine. So there's no real latency, and it removes a lot of the problems of the fallacies of cloud computing. The network's not reliable, blah blah. But it removes, I guess, some of those. It feels like a bit of a cheat code. And you can even go as far as, rather than having to serialize JSON between your two workers, it even supports RPC. So you can literally just call methods between two services, and then you don't have to worry about serializing, deserializing data. And again, all those security concerns around having to have API keys between your two services and all sorts of stuff just goes away. So I think it just simplifies things for a lot of developers.
Yeah, I agree. More broadly on developer experience, how do you assess developer experience when you're using a new tool? It doesn't even have to be Cloudflare, but you're sitting down, you're thinking about what you're going to build. How do you decide, hey, I really like this DX, or hey, this is leaving a bit to be desired?
I think for me, the way I like to think about it, and the reason why I like Cloudflare, and other things as well, but I think recently Cursor is one that I really like as well. So if I just shout something that's not Cloudflare, I love Cursor. It's things that empower me to focus on the things that I care about. So I like to write code and I like to deploy, applications simply and easily. With the things I just mentioned, that's exactly what they allow us to do. It feels like the tool or the platform is working in my favor and working for me, rather than me having to fight the platform. I get my IAM roles slightly wrong and suddenly my worker or my Lambda can't talk to my database or wherever it might be. So yeah, I think for me, the real focus is on empowering the developer to do what they enjoy and offloading as much responsibility as possible to the platform, I guess. To steal one of AWS's kind of things is that they were kind of founded on, I feel like it's something like they do the undifferentiated heavy lifting, which, don't get me wrong, I use AWS in my day job all day long. It's a fantastic platform, but it's also humongous and riddled. It's got so many years of trying to add more and more and more, and it just builds up where challengers have the opportunity to challenge that space because they can do things simpler and they don't have all those years of kind of legacy systems to try and plug in. So yeah, I think that's what I think about when it comes to DX.
Yeah, and also a huge Cursor fan. Walk me through how you're building with the assistance of AI now. What's your process? You're sitting down to write a new application or update something you've already built. How does that all go with you?
I think it depends largely on whether I'm doing my day job, where I also have the luxury of using Cursor, or my side project. So doing my day job, like I said, it's AWS, it's Ruby on Rails, there's a few things on Cloudflare, but not hugely. But either way, it's using Cursor because recently I compared kind of Cursor and Copilot, because Copilot brought out their own kind of agent thing. And it feels like Cursor, at least with its tab completion, kind of reads my mind quite often, whereas I don't find Copilot does. And I kind of lean into the composer a lot because I find it just better in Cursor, where I feel like you see a lot of people kind of say, oh, it doesn't work for me, or it writes rubbish code, or whatever it might be, which in some cases is definitely true. Yeah. But I think the thing that I focus on with the AI is getting it to do the 80% of the work, like the boring work, like the loops and the if statements and things that I just have written like 10 million times that I don't need to write again. And then allow me to focus on like really kind of honing in on the final kind of 20%. And what I find, particularly in my day job where it's a bit more representative because it's a code base with millions and millions of lines of code, it's a huge monolith. I think there's lots of talk of like, is AI going to replace engineers? It's focusing on the people with like domain knowledge and better prompting the AI. They're going to get more out of it.
Yeah, there's something about knowing how to talk to the AI and knowing what to ask for that you can't just tell it anything and get the right answer that I think people miss out on.
Yeah, I think bringing it back to Cloudflare in particular, I think if you prompt it, sometimes it might use some old, out-of-date stuff, which obviously is one of the problems with LLM. They have cutoff dates. But I've been using the cursor rules that they shipped, the mega prompt. And I find that helps a lot because it basically just keeps it up to date with the latest kind of platform developments rather than relying on the LLM's trailing, which is not always up to date, especially with a platform that moves quite quickly.
Yeah, the prompts, the mega prompts, cursor rules are such a huge unlock. It took me way too long to start using one. And once I did, life got a lot better.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right. On the topic of DX, let's talk about local development.
Yeah. So I think what we just talked about is super cool when you get into production and everything. And we've talked about bindings. And one of the tricky things you have is when building applications locally, you need to, emulate databases, caches, queues, whatever it might be. And maybe you reach for Docker containers, or with AWS, maybe you use like local stack, or maybe you hit real resources in AWS sometimes. But all these things have kind of drawbacks. Whereas I think with Cloudflare, they've done something very different where they effectively emulate the same runtime that runs in their data centers locally. So it's called Workerd. And that's the exact same runtime. So if you don't have the problem of if you deploy and it's going to behave exactly the same locally, pretty much as it will in production. So you can catch errors earlier. But the other really nice thing is when we were talking about bindings and creating databases and you put them in that configuration file, when you run that worker locally, because you can run everything locally as you would in production, it will emulate that database or that cache or the queue or wherever it might be so that you don't have to spin up anything. You can literally just run npm run dev and you have your worker running. It'll just run locally on localhost and it will just emulate those databases. So you don't have to worry about anything. I was seeing here, if someone was new to Cloudflare and they were sitting with me and they were like, okay, how do I get started? They could have a worker with a database, a cache, a queue, a durable object running locally on their Mac in like 5 minutes, and everything is just going to work out of the box and be emulated. And it's just, I don't know, this is probably one of the things that people enjoy most is that they can just get started locally. You don't even need to deploy it to Cloudflare. You can just run everything locally. And again, this is the platform doing the heavy lifting for you. You don't have to worry about that local DX and Docker containers. Everything is just out of the box. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. This is a bit of a tangent, but my daughter is 8 years old. She's been learning to code. Wow. She's been using Cloudflare. And to that point, she doesn't have to think about deployment or local. And I remember the time I set her up with her first D1 database because she needed to store some stuff. And she's still grasping what a database is.
Yeah.
But she's not having to learn it through setting up a server with a database. She's learning it through the concepts that she's using a database for. And so just so powerful.
Wow, that's super cool.
We talked a lot about workers. We've touched on some of the other components, but in the book, I love that you kind of take each product by chapter. Can you walk me through a little bit of the data and storage side? So KV, D1, R2, everything in that part of the world. I think KV is a good one because I think if you look at KV, and I've heard
some people kind of say, oh, it's like Redis, which the interface is very like Redis. So if you looked at it and didn't read the docs, and I think this is where things like reading books and things online helps a lot. You then might be confused why your reads and your writes like taking a little bit longer, or perhaps sometimes you read and you get something back completely different from what you wrote 2 seconds ago. So to explain that one, while the interface is like Redis, it's eventually consistent under the hood. So when you write, they're a little slower, and it's designed to be read heavy. So for caching things like configuration and like jot tokens, for example, if you're doing auth, it's perfect for that kind of stuff. What happens when you write is it writes to like a central data store. So it's a little bit slower. And then it'll take up to 60 seconds to propagate around the entire network. But what that means is if you, let's say, back to the Europe and the New York example, if you write in New York, it's not going to be available in Europe if I read it 2 seconds later, for example. Or it might not be. It might be, it might not be, but you can't rely on it being there. And this is the kind of things where if you just go and build and not read and you didn't understand, you might just be, understandably super confused. So I think this is one of the places where, reading really does help. I think we touched on durable objects, but I think when they become kind of more popular and more understood, I think they just unlock a different way of building applications, because you can effectively take things in your domain, like domain entities, for example, the core to your domain. So in the email agent, I had support agents. Maybe in a shopping e-commerce website, you have like orders, for example, and shipping and these kind of entities, but they can effectively be represented by durable objects because in your code, they are defined as JavaScript classes. So even though they look like you're in your code and you're accessing them locally, that they're not, but they're still defined in the same way that JavaScript classes are. So you can add all the methods on there, like adding items to an order. If a customer wants to ask about their order, right, you can talk directly to that order, and it's kind of hard to convey without like actual code on the screen. But it's just, I don't know, it feels like a different way of building applications to anything I felt. So they're very, very powerful. I think one worth also touching on that recently came out is workflows, which I really enjoy. So I think in recent times, I guess it's like a growing kind of trend is durable execution, right? So being able to recover from failure, where you, let's say, to complete a piece of work, you might have like 10 steps that you just carry out. And on step 5, you make an API call and that API goes down even for a second, right? And all of a sudden now, what do? Do you roll back your last 4 steps? Do you have your own way of retrying? How do you know that the state before that you might need in this step is still there? And this kind of durable execution that is becoming more popular, so like temporal, for example, step functions in AWS and workflows with Cloudflare, it effectively allows you to just define your workflows in normal JavaScript. And if a specific step fails, all of the state from the steps before can be retrieved, and it will just retry your workflow from where it failed, and then continue on. I think I see that one used a lot. Like it seems to be becoming quite popular, just because it's effortless and it's a nice way to hand off those common tasks that you need to hand off.
Yeah, it's such a problem as developers we've all faced before. And then I've been using it in the agent space because I feel like agents are so workflowy as well. And they often go through these steps. And I have lots of concerns of what if it's browsing the internet and things just go haywire. Like I want that step to abort and try again. And there's lots of benefits to those retries when you're doing something that's non-deterministic too.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
We touched on the data and storage side. Let's talk a little bit about the AI side. So Vectorize, AI Gateway, Workers AI. How are you thinking about all of that and using it?
Yeah, so to take them one by one, let's take Vectorize first. So Vectorize, as the name suggests, is Cloudflare's vector database. And this effectively is key in things like RAG systems where you need to be able to insert your knowledge base for your agent such that when you want to do your RAG, when you need to pull the relevant context for a user query, you can query Vectorize and say, hey, here's the user input. Give me the 5, whatever, 10 most relevant piece of information based on, let's just say, cosine similarity, for example.
Yep.
So that's vectorized in a nutshell. Super useful if you're doing RAG. And again, super easy to use. It's super easy to use. Workers AI, as I mentioned before, is Cloudflare's global inference network. So again, like I said, everything pretty much on Cloudflare is global by design. And Workers AI is no different. So they have GPUs around the globe so that when you're running your AI workloads, there's not increased latency. Your worker and the GPU are probably very, very close to one another. That's going to reduce the amount of time that it takes to generate that response. And they have kind of a plethora of open source models. So they're probably the flagship ones are probably the Llama models and the DeepSeek models. Those are all in there. There are Whisper models and all sorts of things. So they have a pretty strong catalog, at least in terms of open source models. You're not going to find Anthropic and OpenAI or whatever, but you will find lots of open source models. And then if you are using, let's say, OpenAI, Anthropic, there is AI Gateway, which I think if you're on the workers pay plan, which is $5 a month, you get that for free. And as the name suggests, it's just, you can funnel all your requests through AI Gateway, and it will allow you to do things like rate limiting. There is caching in there so that you don't actually have to hit your downstream. It'll just cache it at the gateway. You can obviously configure that so you don't have to cache all the time. And they're adding new features like guardrails, I believe, are coming so that you can detect things at the gateway level to prevent, abuse and harm, personal information, that kind of stuff. So to me, because it's free, and if I'm using downstream provider, it makes complete sense to put it through the gateway because I just get all these features for free that are going to speed up my app and make it safer.
Yeah, I am personally super excited for guardrails. I've been on the internet long enough to maybe not fully trust the internet. And I remember the first AI application I launched being like, people can just say and do anything with this. And so the guardrails concept of being able to make sure people aren't doing bad stuff with any AI application I launch is super exciting to me.
Yeah. And I think it's not there yet, but it's coming. I think LLM as a judge. So like eval. So you can, AI hallucinates, it makes things up. And while it's never going to catch everything, I think in the future, you'll be able to kind of evals at the gateway level using an LLM where you can kind of almost like you can get the AI to second guess itself, right? Where it's going to say, this has been generated. Here was the question. Does this actually answer the question based on the context? I don't think we have information specifically on the kind of how it's going to work quite yet, or like the kind of the specifics, but I know it's been talked about, and I think that'll be super useful because I don't think I've seen it too much out there already. I'm sure there are providers that do it, but it certainly doesn't seem like something that's like a commodity yet. So I think that'll be hugely, hugely beneficial when it's there.
Yeah, agreed. What are you most excited about right now?
I think for me, I would take it from two different angles. I think the first one is next month. It hasn't been announced yet, but normally in April, there is Dev Week. So I assume in April, maybe May, I don't know, maybe it shifts around. There's Dev Week. And if you want to see what is coming to the platform, Dev Week is the perfect week because there'll be lots of announcements, product developments, new products and stuff. And it's a really cool week. It's a lot of work for me because I try and cover all the announcements. So it's kind of hard, but it's really cool to see what's coming. So I guess things that are announced will be cool to see. And for me, I think it's just kind of nice because I've been around Cloudflare for a while, and it's just nice to see the adoption of the platform and getting more kind of more popular, more people kind of appreciating it. And I'd really like to see it used more kind of in an enterprise context, because I think if we go a little bit back to some of the things that I think need to improve to enable that, it's things like, I think it was kind of leaked a little bit in one of the outage kind of blog posts, but I think organizations are coming. So that's effectively the ability to have kind of different accounts within an organization. And I know that's something we struggle with where I work in my day job, because you have one account and everything has to be namespaced almost by like name, which if you talk to the security guys, they're not too happy because, your staging and your production are in the same account, and they can there's nothing stopping them talking to each other, and they don't like that. So I think that's really, really good. And I think the kind of The role-based access control has got better. I think it's more granular now, but I think some improvements to that will be really nice because, again, where I work, I think within my team, I'm the only person that can log in, because if you log in, you can do lots of things that I don't think you will. Like, you can just delete the worker or edit the worker. And I'm like, I don't know if I want everyone on the team just to be able to edit the worker, right? I don't think they will go and edit the worker, right? I trust my colleagues, but it's more someone can accidentally press a button, right? They're trying to do something. All of a sudden, everything's falling to pieces. So I think those are a couple of areas where, some improvements would be nice, but it's more from I just love to see it more widely adopted, because I think it's powerful and you can move super quick. So I think that's probably two different angles of things I'm excited for.
Yeah. I can neither confirm or deny any rumors, but would agree those are exciting things. And I had to delete a GitHub fork the other day of our Cloudflare docs, and I checked 20 times that I was on the fork, because if I accidentally delete our entire Cloudflare docs repo, it's going to be a long day. And so +1 to it's not that people intentionally do something bad. It's just sometimes you get lost in the interface, and luckily I deleted the right fork.
Oof. Lucky. Saved a day.
Saved the day. Yeah. So on your book, let's close out maybe on the book of what is the main thing you want people to know as they're looking at the book and thinking about, is this for me?
I think if you've been using other cloud providers for a long time and you want to try something different, I think this is the perfect chance to try something different, because I think it reshapes how a lot of things work. And it's, like I said, the platform is not faultless. There are obviously problems with every platform, but it's rare in my experience to introduce someone to the platform, to use it, for them to kind of think it's terrible. They obviously say, oh, this could be better, this could be better. But generally speaking, I think I don't have numbers, but if you looked at retention, which obviously, I don't have access to, but I would assume if you were to track it, the retention would be pretty good, because it's, I don't know, it just, like I was talking about, when I find the platform works for me, and I just think lots of other people will have that same kind of feeling. And I think it's just fun to learn a new way of doing things and just seeing a completely different approach to the things we saw about. So deploying your workers, the bindings, for example, durable objects are completely different to anything you'll ever have seen before, and they're very magical. So it's really just, if you want to try a new platform, you want to just learn some new technologies and just try something a bit different, this is definitely a good thing to try.
Love it. Well, Ashley, this has been great. I always love hearing you talk and explain how you're thinking about things and helping others understand it. The book is Serverless Apps on Cloudflare, so hopefully folks get a chance to check it out. Any closing words?
No, I think you did it justice. So thank you for doing this with me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation too. If you have any questions, you can reach out. We're both on X, Twitter, what you want to call it these days. Just reach out, and I think we're both happy to always chat about Cloudflare. So go ahead.
+1. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the GOTO podcast. Head over to gotopia.tech to discover lots more content from the brightest minds in software development.